One of the highly anticipated anime adaptations this fall 2024, alongside Dandadan, is Koji Miura's Blue Box. This series masterfully intertwines two of the most engaging genres in Japanese storytelling, sports drama and high school romance. But don't worry, Blue Box is not just a sports anime with romantic elements or vice versa, but a unique blend of both aspects. The tale begins with a twist of fate that brings these sports-crossed lovers closer than they ever imagined. Do they have a chance? Let's find out. The story began on a winter day with a male student walking to his school, narrating that every morning there was someone he really wanted to see. Just as he was about to reveal who this person was, upon entering their gym, he was suddenly hit in the face by a ball. This caused him to fall to his knees and cry out in pain. So the person responsible quickly approached him and asked if he was okay, to which he dizzily replied that he was fine. The boy was introduced to us as Taiki Inomada, a third-year junior high student who is part of their school's badminton team. The person who hit him with the ball apologized and explained that she was practicing her elbow passes. She approached him and touched his forehead, saying she wanted to check the resulting scratch, which was already turning red. It was revealed that this person was a girl, introduced to us as Chinatsu Kano, a first-year high school student who is part of their school's basketball team. Chinatsu held his scratch and commented that it must hurt, which flustered Taiki as he insisted he was really okay, while Chinatsu tried to argue otherwise. However, she remembered something and began to reach into her pocket while saying she had something for this. She pulled out the Kit Kat version of their universe called Kot Kat and gave it to Taiki, who took it and stared at it while thinking about how she had pulled out a candy from her pocket. Chinatsu asked him if he thought he could forgive her now, to which Taiki shyly replied in his mind that of course he would forgive her while feeling flustered. In the next scene after that, Taiki explained that he attends Aimei Junior and Senior High School, which is a combined junior and senior high school with a powerhouse of a sports program. After retiring from club activities in junior high, he's been inviting himself over to practice with the high school badminton team. There was open practice in the morning, and he tried to arrive earlier than others, but the first to always arrive was Chinatsu, who was part of the girls' basketball team. Inside the still chilly gymnasium, she repeatedly practiced her shots, and Taiki explained that this was just how Chinatsu was, and he loved her for it. Afterwards, as their practice session began, Taiki commented that he really wanted to marry Chinatsu, and it became apparent that he was talking to someone else. That person replied that it would never happen, which surprised Taiki with its harshness. This person was introduced to us as Kyo Kasahara, also a third-year student and a member of the badminton team. Kyo asked how they would suddenly get married, so Taiki replied that her face would be the very first thing he'd see in the morning when he woke up, and that would surely be equivalent to paradise. In response, Kyo told him to back off a bit because there was no way he could manage to date Chinatsu. He explained that Chinatsu was the future MVP of the basketball team, possessing not only skills but also a great personality and what they call star quality. She was an extremely popular player both inside and outside their school, and had even been featured in magazines. On the other hand, Taiki, while perhaps okay at badminton, had no popularity whatsoever. This made Taiki tear up at Kyo's harshness, to which Kyo added that they only allowed him to practice with the high school team and that he was at the bottom of the totem pole. To put it another way, Kyo said, Chinatsu was the seeded team while Taiki would be eliminated in the first round, showing how different their levels were. They also had nothing in common except for practicing early, to which Taiki responded that they did have something in common. For Kyo's information, Taiki's mom was an alumna of Aimei's basketball team, prompting Kyo to make a side comment about how private schools seem to have many legacies, thinking that Tanaka had told him the same thing. Taiki added that he understood what Kyo was saying, but nevertheless, one really needs to rise to the challenge because you don't make 100% of the shots you don't take, and fighting against a powerhouse is fun in its own right. Kyo replied that if that's the case, at the very least, he should set his sights on advancing to the second round, meaning he should introduce himself to Chinatsu or ask for her number, to which Taiki admitted was a good point. While they were talking, a girl suddenly startled Taiki and asked what they were discussing, causing Taiki to jolt in surprise. Slightly irritated, Taiki asked why she did that, to which the girl cutely replied that she was just saying hi. This girl was introduced to us as Hina Kano, a third-year junior high student who is part of the rhythmic gymnastics team. Because of her answer, Taiki asked if she was a grade schooler to do such a thing, to which she seriously replied that she wasn't and that she would be in high school come spring, just like Taiki and Kyo. Hina added that she had grown 7 whole centimeters since elementary school, to which Taiki sarcastically praised her, saying wow, she was now a whole 150 centimeters tall. This annoyed her, and she kicked Taiki in the butt while telling him to shut up, saying that he hadn't even reached 170 centimeters himself. Taiki defended himself, saying he was still growing, while Kyo thought to himself that they were both like grade schoolers. Hina brushed off their playful banter and asked if something was troubling Taiki, to which he replied that nothing was, but he quickly asked, just for reference, what kinds of things girls like boys to do for them. This made Hina excited, and she started to blush while saying that Taiki shouldn't tell her he was having love problems, and as she patted his back, she added that if that was the case, he should leave everything to her. She began to explain, saying that first of all, Taiki shouldn't be a beta, but instead act comfortable in his own skin and be a reliable person. She added that the most important thing of all was for him to become a hunk like Marcel Nguyen. Because of this, Taiki became disappointed and speechless, and decided to leave with Kyo while asking if their coach would be coming, which annoyed Hina. The next day, while Taiki was walking to the gymnasium, he was exercising his hand using hand grippers, and he thought that he shouldn't have asked Hina because her taste was too particular, but the author left a side note that he was still working out anyway. When he arrived at the door, he saw Chinatsu sitting in front of it while reading a notebook, so he thought that maybe the gym was still closed. He stared at Chinatsu's face, causing him to blush at her beauty, and he realized this was his chance to talk to her. He made a plan in his mind, and the first thing he would do was introduce himself, but he quickly erased that idea because it seemed too sudden, and he thought he should first thank her for the chocolate she gave him the other day, even though he hadn't eaten it yet. When he glanced at the notebook she was reading, which appeared to be about basketball strategies, he got the idea to ask her what she was reading. He tried to speak, but immediately retreated, thinking that it might be better to just stay quiet. He noticed that Chinatsu was starting to catch a cold, and because of that, he sprang into action and offered her his scarf if she wanted to borrow it, which puzzled Chinatsu. He added that he had warm tea and that this thermos was good at retaining heat, and he also had gloves and pocket warmers. It didn't take long for him to realize how talkative he had become and how many things he had offered, so he stopped talking and became embarrassed, cursing in his mind that he had charged in blindly, and he became even more flustered when he realized he had offered Chinatsu a pocket warmer even though he was her underclassman she doesn't even know. Nevertheless, despite his embarrassment, he saw Chinatsu smiling while staring at him. So he blushed and asked what was up, to which she replied that she was wondering what other things he would pull out of his bag. Taiki panicked and started looking for other things in his bag, which made Chinatsu laugh, and she said jokingly that she was just kidding, and that she appreciated his concern, to which Taiki replied it was his pleasure while excitedly thinking that he had made her laugh. Suddenly, Taiki sneezed because of the cold, causing him to turn to the other side, and because of this, Chinatsu suddenly put on the scarf he had lent her around her neck and said she's all right, and that it was to keep his body warm. Taiki stared into Chinatsu's captivating eyes, and here he thought that there was something about this that reminded him of a newlywed helping their spouse put on a necktie. While he was thinking this, his cheek touched Chinatsu's hand, so she apologized to him, to which he said it was okay while thinking that he slightly suspected that Chinatsu had a lower body temperature. Their moment was interrupted when the late guard opened the gym and apologized to them, but Taiki felt excited again when Chinatsu told him to try not to catch a cold and called him by his full name. Taiki was surprised and asked how she knew his name, to which Chinatsu replied that it was a good question. Taiki wondered if Chinatsu had known his name for a long time and had secretly been in love with him for the longest time. But when Chinatsu said he had a good mom, he was confused, but then realized that his name was written on his scarf in case it got lost, which surprised him and made him start to feel embarrassed. But he also looked on the bright side that at least Chinatsu now knew his name. Nevertheless, embarrassment still prevailed, so he screamed in his mind that it was still embarrassing. In the next scene, the badminton team's practice began, and here they were all practicing solo and duo teams, and of course, Taiki was included. It wasn't long before they took a break, and one of his teammates asked Taiki if it was okay for him to wet the rags, to which he agreed. He wet the rags, and while doing so, he kept thinking that at least Chinatsu now knew his name, and when he heard her say it, he thought it was more powerful than he had imagined. When he looked in the mirror, he saw that he was grinning weirdly due to excitement, so he adjusted his expression and finished what he was doing. He said to himself while closing the faucet that in any case, at least he had made it to the second round, and while wringing out the rag, he confidently thought that the next step would be the third round where he would ask for Chinatsu's number. While he was walking back to the gym, he noticed something outside the locker room, and he saw Chinatsu talking to the coach of the girls' basketball team. Suddenly, Hina arrived and asked what he was looking at outside, causing Taiki to jolt in surprise again, and he blushed as he said he wasn't looking at anything, so Hina stared intently into his eyes. After staring at him, she put her hand on his shoulder and told him not to aim too high while shaking her head, which shocked Taiki, and he irritatedly said that Hina of all people was saying that. He explained that he thought Chinatsu looked serious, so he couldn't help but watch, to which Hina pondered and told him that the other day she saw Chinatsu walking with a guy, which greatly surprised Taiki as if he had lost millions, causing Hina to laugh at his expression and say it was just a joke, which further irritated Taiki. In the next scene, in the evening after their practice, some of Taiki's teammates were leaving while others were still packing up their things. While packing up, Taiki noticed that he had left his towel in the gym, so he quickly stood up and asked Kyo if he had forgotten something, and just as he was about to say yes and tell Kyo to go ahead, Kyo himself said that in that case, he would go ahead. Taiki went to the gym and felt relieved when he saw that the door was still open, and when he entered, he saw Chinatsu still practicing her shooting. He thought to himself that he didn't expect her to still be practicing, and when Chinatsu noticed him, she called out his name, which made him a bit excited that she remembered his name, and he asked her if she was still practicing, to which Chinatsu replied that she wasn't happy with how she played during their practice earlier. Because of this, he told Chinatsu that it wasn't good to overwork herself, to which Chinatsu replied that she knew that, but today she just wanted to feel the ball for a longer time. Chinatsu shot again, and while watching her, Taiki commented in his mind that she really loved basketball. Chinatsu turned to look at him while shooting, which surprised him and made him blush because she had caught him staring at her, and she suddenly passed the ball to him. She happily asked him if he was up for a one-on-one game, which confused him, but it didn't take long before they did it. After a while, extreme fatigue was visible on Taiki's face, and here Chinatsu invited him to take a rest, to which he tried to speak while panting heavily, but only ended up coughing, making him think how pathetic he must look. Nevertheless, Chinatsu said that Taiki from the badminton team met her expectations and that he was quick in his movements. So Taiki shared that his mom used to be on the basketball team, so they sometimes played together, to which Chinatsu said it was the same for her mom. Her mom was also on the basketball team, and they used to play together before she started youth basketball. This made Taiki think that they were similar in that regard and that it must be fate, and Chinatsu asked him if he had ever considered trying out for basketball, to which Taiki dejectedly said that he didn't think he was cut out for the team aspect of it, and we were shown a flashback where he stole the ball and ran all the way to the ring, causing Chinatsu to make a side comment apologizing for overhearing that. Besides, Taiki said, he really loved badminton. Standing on the court alone and the feeling that all the responsibility was on him, whether he won or lost, it was either his credit or fault. Because of this, Chinatsu commented that it sounded masochistic, which surprised him, but Chinatsu added that she understood it, and that must be the reason why he practiced so diligently. Taiki also commented here that he could say the same about Chinatsu, so she countered by telling him to just accept the compliment. He explained what he meant and asked if it was correct that Chinatsu was still practicing after her last game of junior high, which puzzled her, but he added that it must have happened a year and a half ago. Practice was canceled that day, but he still went to school since his house was nearby and he had some things to put away, and that was when he saw Chinatsu practicing with tears streaming down her eyes. After that, he heard about how her team had fallen just short of making it to the finals. He was sure that Chinatsu's feelings were crushed because of that, and when he thought about how hard she had worked only to be crushed like that, he told himself that he needed to work as hard as she did, and as he was saying this, he realized that this was probably the first time he realized he liked Chinatsu. Chinatsu seemed to become teary-eyed and blushed intensely after hearing what Taiki said, which confused Taiki, and Chinatsu commented that she had forgotten about that. Suddenly, the guard entered the gym and told them it was time to go home, which they complied with. While Chinatsu was cleaning up the basketballs, Taiki commented in his mind that it was a surprise, and he thought for a moment that Chinatsu was crying. One of the basketballs fell from its container, so Taiki tried to pick it up, but unexpectedly, he and Chinatsu picked it up at the same time, and as they were picking it up, their fingers touched. Chinatsu happily thanked him, so Taiki shyly told her not to mention it. Taiki fell silent while watching Chinatsu push the basketball storage cart, and he thought to himself while looking at his hand that had touched Chinatsu's that it might just be because they had just finished practicing, but Chinatsu's hand felt warmer. In the next scene, spring season had arrived, and a weather forecast was saying that today would be sunny across the country of Japan, and here it was shown that Taiki had overslept, so he was rushing to leave to avoid being late for class. When he greeted his mom good morning, she wondered if he wasn't going to wear his sweatshirt today. So he replied that he wouldn't because it would be warm outside, to which his mom reasoned that she had just washed it, making him apologize. He saw an open magazine on their table and noticed Chinatsu was in it, causing him to suddenly blush, which made his mom ask if he knew that girl, to which he denied and said he didn't. His mom explained that in her time, she used to be teammates with Chinatsu's mom, which greatly surprised him and made him say what loudly, causing his mom to ask why he was shouting, to which he replied there was no reason, but in his mind, he was extremely excited because he and Chinatsu had so many things in common and he wished he had known this sooner. His mom added that sometimes they needed to keep in touch, but she didn't know that Chinatsu had become so skilled and amazing, but it was really a shame because their work would take them overseas. And when he heard this, Taiki's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. His mom said that Chinatsu's family would be moving in mid-March, so she imagined how much she would miss them. Here, Taiki realized why Chinatsu was seriously talking to the girls' basketball coach the other day, and because of this, he immediately left the house and ran to catch up with Chinatsu. He wondered what all of this meant and what was going on, and if this was really okay with Chinatsu. While running, he explained in his mind that Chinatsu always arrived first in the morning, practiced more than others, and did so even when she was completely crushed inside. So he also asked himself about her feelings, all the effort she put in, her goals, her teammates, everything, and he wondered if Chinatsu could really leave all of that behind. When he arrived at the gym, he saw Chinatsu practicing as usual, and she turned to look at him when he arrived there panting, so she asked him what the problem was. After catching his breath, Taiki shouted that Chinatsu needed to go to nationals. She had taught him that you need to keep your focus on the goal and put in effort every day, and even if you lose, you just need to keep looking forward, so he was begging her not to give up. Just as Taiki was saying that it wasn't okay for her to leave everything behind just because of factors she couldn't control, he was cut off by Chinatsu when she apologized and explained that she wasn't going abroad, which left Taiki speechless. Taiki was bewildered in his mind, and Chinatsu explained that technically her family was going, but she wouldn't be going with them and would be staying here at her family friend's house. Because of this, Taiki gradually realized that he had just embarrassed himself by voicing his thoughts even though Chinatsu wasn't really leaving, and he had charged in blindly again, so he was overwhelmed with embarrassment. He decided to leave immediately while saying that it was good then, also to escape his embarrassment, But he stopped when Chinatsu said that she had struggled with the decision. She said she knew she would miss her family because she would be far from them, but then she had a chance to remember how the season ended for her in junior high, and she realized that she wanted to go to nationals and didn't want to give up. She smiled at Taiki and added that it was all because of him. After that, Chinatsu happily thanked Taiki wholeheartedly, causing Taiki to scratch the back of his neck in embarrassment and try to explain that he hadn't really done anything. But his speech was interrupted when Chinatsu passed him the ball and invited him for another one-on-one, which made Taiki blush. But he also invited her to try badminton afterwards, to which Chinatsu agreed. After that, the next day, while lying on his bed, Taiki was left speechless because of how embarrassing his actions were yesterday. He started rolling around in agony while thinking about why he would assume things so easily and commit the biggest blind charge of his entire life. He also thought that it was fortunate it was Sunday today, and as he was going down to their dining area, he said that this might be the first time ever that he didn't want to see Chinatsu, but to his surprise, he would see her inside their dining area, and she even greeted him good morning, which filled him with dread and nervousness. Shocked, he asked why she was in their house, and his mom also arrived there with Chinatsu's mom and commented that he was already awake. She asked him if he remembered what she had said the other day and introduced Chinatsu to him, explaining that starting this spring, she would be living with them for a while Chinatsu's mom thanked them for their kindness. She said she couldn't express how much help they were to them, to which Taiki's mom said not to think about it and asked what else was the sense of being ex-teammates. Chinatsu thanked them for accepting her, while Taiki was still in shock and disbelief at the situation, and in the end, he screamed in his mind that they've got to be kidding him. In the next scene, Chinatsu told Taiki's family that from now on, she would be in their care, and she introduced herself to them, to which Taiki's parents and grandfather happily welcomed her to the Inomata house, while Taiki was still dumbfounded in the background. Taiki's dad commented on how beautiful Chinatsu really was, while his grandfather said she looked exactly like their grandmother when she was young, prompting his mom to point out that didn't they get divorced. Taiki's dad asked Taiki if wasn't this great because now their house would be livelier, to which Taiki seemed devastated by the situation and said in his mind that that's not exactly how he'd put it, especially since he could barely keep it together just seeing Chinatsu in her weekend clothes. Taiki noticed everything about her, like her going up their stairs, standing in their kitchen with his mom, and even eating sushi. He knelt down in his room as if struggling while thinking about how he could endure this, and he became even more nervous when he thought about whether this would last for almost 2 years until Chinatsu graduated. And until now, he was thrilled to advance to the second round, but living in the same house was Olympic level. He sweated nervously while saying this wasn't good for an athlete and it would give him a heart attack, and while he was thinking, someone knocked on his door, and it turned out to be Chinatsu freshly showered, who just wanted to let him know that their bath was now empty because his mom had asked her to tell him, causing Taiki to turn suddenly as if he'd seen a ghost and immediately diverted his gaze to a manga because he was flustered seeing Chinatsu in her loungewear. He also said in his mind that she's even prettier when freshly showered, and in response to what she said to him, he nervously said that he would take a bath right after reading the manga he picked up. Unexpectedly, Chinatsu approached him and excitedly asked if what he was reading was the Jump issue for this week. And while she was saying this to him with their faces close together, mentioning that she had been so busy with moving that she didn't have a chance to read it, he was internally panicking because they were so close to each other. Taiki couldn't take it anymore and moved away while shyly saying he could lend the manga to Chinatsu, to which Chinatsu asked if it was really okay. So Taiki said of course, but in his mind he was saying that besides, he couldn't handle being close to Chinatsu anymore. After Chinatsu took the manga, her joy was evident and she even grinned, which flustered Taiki even more and made him ask what was up, to which Chinatsu said she was just thinking about how lucky she was. She explained that living in someone else's house could be nerve-wracking, and even though their parents were good friends, she had really only met Taiki's parents a few times. So having him here, the guy she sees at morning practice, and the guy who lends her his copy of Jump, puts her at ease, causing Taiki to stare at her and soon wonder what she meant by at ease, and he started to feel dejected and overwhelmed by gut-wrenching guilt. Because of this, he decided to take a bath while thinking that he was still a guy, and wondering if Chinatsu wasn't really fazed by the idea of living with a boy. When Taiki entered the bath, he smelled a scent, and here he imagined how Chinatsu had bathed earlier, causing him to sit down and think that if that was the case, he was the only one acting like an idiot. After that, we moved to a scene where Taiki was intensely practicing, and when he delivered a solid smash, Kyo couldn't stop it. Taiki exclaimed yes in excitement when he scored, while Kyo was wondering why he was so energized and if he shouldn't be down in the dumps, thinking that this didn't make sense. Taiki replied that he could be happy about things that make him happy, so Kyo asked if that was so, and said he understood his excitement, but to make sure that no one else knows they're living together in the same house, which confused Taiki, prompting Kyo to tell him not to play dumb and to just look. When Taiki looked at the practicing Chinatsu, he commented while excited that yes, she really was cool. So while serving, Kyo pointed out that that wasn't what he was referring to and widened his vision. Taiki did so, and here he noticed that he wasn't the only one who liked Chinatsu, but many others did too. Kyo then asked him if he remembered what he said about Chinatsu having many admirers, and if they found out the truth, they would surely target him, causing Taiki to sweat nervously. Kyo added that he was still lucky because even though it was due to the situation with her parents, he got to live in the same house as his crush, and just as Kyo was about to say that maybe in the end they would date, Taiki contradicted him and said that wouldn't happen. Chinatsu didn't go with him and stayed in Japan by herself, and that must have taken a lot of determination, so he couldn't look at that and ask such a selfish question like whether they could enter into a relationship. So that was the reason why he was thinking, and he also wanted to make it to the nationals this summer, which confused Kyo. So he added that if he couldn't do that, he would never be a good match for Chinatsu. Kyo asked if he was seriously planning to make it to the nationals as a first year because historically speaking, only a few had accomplished that, and to be honest, even he didn't have the ability at his level, to which Taiki replied that perhaps that was the case, but he was still free to strive for it, causing Kyo to stare at him. After that, he asked Kyo if he was up for another round. So Kyo said that resting was also an important part of practice, which disappointed Taiki. One of their teammates asked Taiki if he wanted to play singles, to which he immediately agreed. While Kyo went to the side to drink water, and while drinking, Hina arrived and commented that Taiki was playing with someone different. Hina also asked if he hadn't been playing non-stop since earlier, so Kyo said that once Taiki decides on a goal, he makes a beeline for it, which made Hina ask again what he meant by goal. So he explained that Taiki said he wanted to make it to the nationals that year, which made Hina ask again if he thought he could do it, but he didn't answer. So Hina just laughed and commented that Taiki really liked to push himself beyond his limits, just like in their first year of junior high. Kyo said in his mind that he admitted that people who are true to themselves are the toughest kind. While watching Taiki, he added that no matter what they're going through, they keep going. After that, in the evening, we went to the Inamoto house, and here Taiki was following a workout plan, and we could see how intense his routine was. When he reached 50 on the abs roller, he collapsed from exhaustion and thought that it was really difficult, but he said he needed to work hard on this. While watching a badminton match, he suddenly became energized again and started doing reverse crunches while thinking that at his current skill level, making it to the nationals was just a pie in the sky. Suddenly, Chinatsu passed by his door while he was working out, so he sat up and started cleaning his yoga mat in surprise, and she asked him what he was watching, to which he replied it was nothing important. He said he had asked someone earlier while playing to video record him, so he was just checking the recording, and when he said that, Chinatsu seemed very interested in watching it, so she said she wanted to see it, which made Taiki embarrassed, and he said it wasn't possible and it was too embarrassing, which made Chinatsu ask what the big deal was and that she always watched him when they were in the gym. Taiki paused there and blushed while thinking that he thought he was the only one watching Chinatsu, and because of that, he gave her his phone and let her watch his match. Chinatsu was amazed at his quick reaction time to the fast shuttlecock and how he fly around the court, but he brushed it off and said he was still too slow. He said that if he couldn't get out of his ready position faster, the accuracy of his shots would suffer, and he couldn't just barely return it, but he needed to hit it with spare time. At this rate, he said, the nationals wouldn't be possible, and when he said that, Chinatsu asked what he meant by nationals, so he shouted that it was nothing and to forget what he said, and in his mind, Taiki said he hadn't planned to tell Chinatsu until he had made some improvement. However, Chinatsu just grinned and said that he had already said it, which confused him, to which Chinatsu pointed out that he had said he was going to the nationals, which made him try to contradict her. So Chinatsu asked if this meant he wasn't really going even though he insisted her on continuing. Because of this, Taiki was forced to admit that he was going to the nationals, so he commented in his mind, "Oh great, and why did he always look lame when he was in front of Chinatsu?" After that, Chinatsu stood up and told him to wait there for a moment, and she got something from outside. When Chinatsu returned, she gave him a wish ribbon and said she wanted him to have it. Chinatsu had made this when she decided to stay in Japan. It was a reminder for her to make her wish come true, and she thought she should put her resolve in physical form where if the wish ribbon came off on its own, it meant her wish would come true. Just as Chinatsu was about to say, but if he didn't want to take it because it wasn't his thing, Taiki immediately shouted that he would happily accept it. He took the wish ribbon, and while putting it on his ankle, he was thrilled to receive a handmade present from Chinatsu and said he would cherish it for life. Chinatsu pointed out while he was tying it that he might cut off his circulation that way, so Chinatsu took the ribbon and tied it to his foot herself. While tying it, Chinatsu also told him that she hoped he would really make it to the nationals. After that, Chinatsu showed something to Taiki and said if he could see that now they have matching ribbons, and she stood up while teasingly saying not to take too much care of it. She left his room and they bid each other goodnight, and as Chinatsu was leaving, Taiki thought that he would work so hard that the wish ribbon would break off soon, but he also thought that it was easier said than done. It wasn't long before he let out the excitement he was feeling, where he silently screamed while covering his face and thought that now he liked Chinatsu even more. After that, he stared at the wish ribbon and thought that every time he got distracted, he would need to do 30 more crunches. The next day, after Taiki prepared to go to school, he immediately walked out of their house, and before he could leave, Chinatsu caught up with him while coming down the stairs and was surprised that he was leaving already. She commented that he woke up so early even though it was spring break. So Taiki explained that as the lowest ranking member, he needed to prep, and he also said in his mind that he wanted to practice, to which Chinatsu replied that in that case, they would see each other later. Taiki blushed and said the same, and while walking outside their house, he thought that they almost seemed like a married couple here. In the next scene, Taiki had arrived at the gymnasium, and here Hina wondered what he was doing there, and it turned out he was intensely doing sit-ups while saying he was fighting against distractions, and he said in his mind that the qualifiers for nationals were coming up, so he needed to be focused, while Hina wondered about the distractions he mentioned, and suddenly asked him if something happened between him and Chinatsu, which made Taiki stop doing sit-ups and start rolling around on his yoga mat in excitement, prompting Hina to ask if she was right. Taiki stood up to distance himself from Hina, but she followed him while asking what happened, to which he replied nothing. But Hina followed up with a question if he had figured out the code of her phone's lock screen, causing Taiki to ask if she thought he was a stalker. Taiki was troubled by this and thought that if Hina found out that they were living together in the same house, it was bound to cause a big commotion because he knew Hina was talkative and would tell other people. Because of this, he thought he needed to hide it from her, and as they were going to the locker room, they saw Chinatsu, who had just arrived and was still taking off her shoes. Suddenly, she reached out with his wallet, and just as she was about to say that he had forgotten his wallet at home, Taiki shouted to cut her off and nervously took it, saying he thought he had dropped it somewhere and thanked her very much for picking it up for him. The nervousness was visible on Taiki's face as he wished in his mind that Chinatsu would go along with what he was doing, which Chinatsu did and said you're welcome, but her face seemed to grin and was affected by what he did, and she started walking into the gymnasium, which made him wonder. He wondered if he had acted like a jerk just now, while Hina was teary-eyed with pride because she said he could now talk to Chinatsu, which irritated him. Their lunch recess arrived, and while eating, he told Kyo what happened. So Kyo told him that he really wasn't good at that kind of thing, and that he should have told her ahead of time that he wanted to hide the fact that they were living together in the same house. To which Taiki replied that it was too late and asked if he was screwed, to which Kyo said he could call it that, and considering that he avoided the topic so quickly, he wouldn't blame Chinatsu if she thought he was ashamed to live with her, or worse, he didn't want to be associated with her. Because of this, Taiki panicked completely and nervously thought that was the complete opposite of what he was thinking while remembering the privilege of seeing her still sleepy every morning, while Kyo was thinking how sweet it was. A teacher arrived and ordered them to carry the foldable chairs, saying they were needed for the entrance ceremony next week, to which Taiki tried to reason that they were also new students, but the teacher just congratulated them, making him think that he wasn't listening. The teacher also saw 2 female students and called them over, and it turned out to be Hina and Chinatsu, and he also ordered the 2 to help while Kyo tried to leave but was stopped by the nervous Taiki. While carrying a chair, Taiki thought that he needed to clarify what happened earlier, and he didn't want Chinatsu to get the wrong idea and think that he didn't want to be associated with her or anything. When Chinatsu lifted 2 chairs, he offered to carry one, but she coldly thanked him and didn't accept his offer, which left him speechless, and he thought she was angrier than he thought. Or maybe she was just reading the surroundings and pretending to be a stranger, but he got nervous again and thought that she wouldn't really hate him just because of what he did earlier. Hina noticed his concern, so she suddenly gave a thumbs up while her expression said she would take care of it. But this troubled him even more because she would get involved. Hina approached Chinatsu to confirm her identity, then proceeded to ask her a question. Hina asked if she had a boyfriend, which made Taiki even more speechless and thought she was an idiot, while Chinatsu was confused but answered no, while Taiki was asking Kyo how Hina could be this ballsy and if that was really a question you ask an upperclassman you just met, to which Kyo replied what else did he expect and that she was a rhythmic gymnast, which made Taiki ask again how that explained anything. Hina asked again if she didn't think about finding a boyfriend to walk with her and hang out at a karaoke, and while Hina was asking Chinatsu this, Taiki was imagining those situations with him as Chinatsu's boyfriend, which made his heart beat faster, so he tried to slow it down. Chinatsu answered Hina's question and said that for now, she was putting all her attention on the team, which surprised Taiki while making Hina nervous because she didn't know what to say next. So she turned to Taiki, who told her that she was the one who asked first, so she shouldn't act awkward. Taiki added in his mind that besides, he knew Chinatsu would say that. After they placed the foldable chairs outside a room, a man came out and asked if it was correct that they were part of the sports team, and he was impressed that they still came even during spring vacation. So Taiki said they were just given an errand while on break, to which the man thanked them and told Taiki that Coach Iguchi had put in a good word for him. He said there had been a lot more power behind Taiki's shuttlecocks lately, which made Taiki exclaim if that was true, to which the man agreed and confirmed that the coach said that Taiki can compete at the high school level. He added that Coach Iguchi mentioned that he had a real shot at making it to the next nationals qualifiers, which made Taiki's face glow with joy, and when he was about to excitedly ask Chinatsu if she had heard that, he saw her walking away and going back to the gym, which bothered him a bit. Hina asked Kyo if something really happened between Chinatsu and Taiki because Chinatsu seemed very angry at him, to which Kyo replied that those 2 were a better match than he initially thought, which confused Hina. After that, we moved to their practice again, and here Taiki had just finished a match with his teammate and thanked him, while his other group mates were commenting that he was really working hard, while one said it was because he was about to start high school soon. While practicing, Taiki felt upset with Chinatsu and thought that she shouldn't ignore him and that he had been thinking about this for a while, so he was getting annoyed. And the truth of the matter was that he preferred to be open about it and show off their situation. He heard a thud beside him, so he turned to look, and it turned out Chinatsu had lost her balance and sat down on the floor. He was worried but stopped himself from approaching, and her teammate was the one who helped her stand up. Kyo commented sarcastically on the side that he looked worried but couldn't talk to Chinatsu because she was just a stranger he had nothing to do with. Because of this, Taiki scratched his head while thinking how mean Kyo was, and we moved to a scene where Chinatsu was at the faucet area cleaning her tumbler. While cleaning, Taiki approached her and asked if she was okay, which confused her, prompting Taiki to say that she fell earlier. So she replied that she was fine, but wasn't he pretending not to know her? Taiki turned to her in surprise when he heard that, and he apologized to her and said he shouldn't have acted like that so suddenly. Taiki explained to her that he thought he was a bit embarrassed about the fact that they were living together, and because she had a greater effect on people than she realized, if they found out about their situation, they would start making up all sorts of stories. Taiki added that he was afraid it might affect their team activities, so that was the reason, which surprised Chinatsu, and she said to wait a moment and seemed confused that that was Taiki's reason. Taiki was flustered and confusedly asked what other reason there could be. So Chinatsu explained that she just thought it was because Taiki had a crush on the girl from the rhythmic gymnastics team, Hina, which left Taiki speechless and made him shout what. So Chinatsu added that she thought this because he suddenly pretended not to know her in front of Hina. Taiki said that was just a coincidence, to which Chinatsu pointed out that Hina even asked her if she had a boyfriend. So she thought Hina was trying to feel out the situation because she liked him too. Chinatsu said she understood that he wanted to hide the fact that they were living together in the same house from his crush, so she thought she'd create some distance so Hina wouldn't get suspicious. If worst came to worst, she said she could sleep in the shed from now on, or look for dirt-cheap housing, which left Taiki speechless. He thought, did this mean Chinatsu was looking out for him and Hina this whole time? Taiki put his hand over his mouth when he realized this, and soon after, he laughed while thinking how adorable Chinatsu was, and told her that sometimes she could really be a dummy, which surprised Chinatsu and made her blush in embarrassment. But it quickly changed to a pouting face as she watched Taiki laugh non-stop. Because of this, she playfully elbowed Taiki and said he didn't need to laugh like that, to which Taiki said he couldn't help it. While Hina was walking, she saw them okay again and talking, so she stared at the two of them. The new school year has begun. The coach congratulated the badminton team and said he knew it was a busy time, but he reminded them that the national qualifiers were approaching. Therefore, they would have matches between their team members next week to determine who would participate in the qualifiers. He told everyone to be prepared, and they all agreed. Hyo said to Taiki that there was still a long road ahead to reach the nationals. He explained that Taiki first needed to become a regular on the team, make it to the top 16 in the district qualifiers, and then become one of the top 2 in the prefectural qualifiers. At the very least, he would need to defeat the second-year student Haryu, who had placed 3rd in the prefecture last time. While looking at Haryu, Taiki said to put it in another way, if he could win against him, he would surely reach the nationals. He added that this goal was easier to understand. Hyo then asked him what his record was so far against Haryu. Taiki then told him not to ask about that. Anyway, Taiki noticed that there were many spectators in the gallery today. Hyo explained that they might be students there to check out the various clubs. However, he admitted that they were probably there because of Chinatsu, who was busy practicing basketball. The boys watched her, clearly impressed. Hyo added that every year, Chinatsu's fan base grew larger. He also mentioned that some of the spectators were there to see Hina, who was gracefully performing gymnastics. The two boys noticed that she had many fans as well. Meanwhile, the gymnastics coach complimented Hina on her performance. She said she was marvelous and beautiful to watch. She called her the star of the team and said the goddess of rhythmic gymnastics has smiled upon her. Because of this, she said they should try their best to become number 1 in the entire country. Hyo commented that they were really counting on Hina to do well. 2 students near them were talking. One said that after watching Hina, they wondered what they, as upperclassmen, could do to compete with her. They mentioned that Hina had ranked 4th in the entire country during junior high, and they had heard that her father was a former representative for the Japanese gymnastics team. Therefore, they considered Hina practically the chosen one. Hina then noticed Taiki watching, so she jokingly charged him 2,000 yen as a spectator fee. Taiki was annoyed and said there was no way he would pay that. Hina teased him, telling him not to be embarrassed that she caught him staring at her passionately. Taiki denied this. Hina added that she understood the feeling of being charmed by the sight of something so beautiful. But Taiki retorted that she couldn't say that about herself. As Taiki protested and looked behind him, he noticed Chinatsu watching. Chinatsu's friend praised the gymnastics team, and Chinatsu agreed. Because of this, Taiki paused and said it was time for him to practice. Hina was surprised by this sudden change. While walking in the Central Street shopping arcade, Taiki thought that Chinatsu might be getting the wrong idea about him and Hina, as she always caught them in such situations. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the back, and when he looked, Hina had moved in front of him. Shocked, Taiki asked what she was doing there since her house in the opposite direction. She replied that a famous chiropractor had opened a clinic in Izumicho. Taiki had also heard about it and said it was close to his house. However, he became nervous, realizing it would be dangerous if Hina caught Chinatsu going to his house. So, he needed to lead Hina away from there while Chinatsu was still at school. He invited Hina to hurry before it got crowded. But Taiki was surprised when he noticed Hina had stopped. She was distracted by a cute dog that she wanted to pet. Hina said it looked like her uncle Shuhei, but Taiki thought to himself that no one there knew who that was. Annoyed, he thought this was the problem with youngest children born in the first quarter of the year with type B blood. But then again, Hina didn't know about the situation. However, Hina stopped again when she saw a stall selling taiyaki. They looked delicious, so Taiki assumed she was doing this on purpose this time. Hina was excited to see chunky-style taiyaki there. Fed up, Taiki said he'd buy her one, then she should hurry to the chiropractor. Hina looked at him, drooling, and said she didn't need it. Surprised by her expression, Taiki took out a camera, saying she needed to see the look on her face. Hina swallowed her drool and explained that eating it would put her over her daily caloric intake. Moreover, each taiyaki contained 40 grams of sugar, and she had already consumed 110 that day. Taiki wondered if she always considered such things. To which Hina replied, of course. She explained that even a slight increase in body weight would make her less graceful, wasting training time to lose the weight. Hina didn't want this to lead to injury or a slump. She stood up and admitted she wasn't good at making efforts, but if she could endure something to achieve her goal, she would. Hina was surprised by Taiki's unusual reaction. Embarrassed, he said Hina sounded cool because of that, but she replied that it didn't seem like that was what he was thinking. Taiki clarified that it was impressive how Hina turned down the taiyaki, but the fact that she didn't consider such efforts as trying hard proved that she was normally strict with herself. He added that when he thought about the difference in standards between himself and those stronger than him, he became a bit unsure of himself. Moreover, knowing that Hina was competing with her peers, Taiki said with a smile that she was truly awesome. Hina hadn't expected this and asked if everything was okay, as he had suddenly become sentimental, praising her just because of the taiyaki. Annoyed, Taiki told her not to act so calm about it. He turned away, embarrassed, and said to remind him never to praise her again. Hina blushed and admitted that she thought Taiki was the admirable one. She recalled what she had seen and said that he had managed to approach and talk to Chinatsu, even though he knew she was way out of his league. Taiki then asked if she was trying to upset him. Hina replied that if there was anything she could do to help, he should just say so and she would assist. First, he told her to stop with the dramatics. Moreover, he said there was nothing for her to gain by helping him. Suddenly, Hina started skipping, prompting Taiki to ask what she was doing. She said he might be right and called him Mr. Moving on to the previous topic. But she thought his stance on challenges was what made him cool. Hina walked ahead of him and said that, as a friend, she wanted him to succeed. Taiki laughed and asked what had gotten into her. However, Hina suddenly reacted as if she had seen something. Taiki asked what it was, but Hina tried to stop him from peeking. But it was too late. As he looked behind, he saw Chinatsu walking and talking with Haryu. Taiki and Hina glanced at them simultaneously, while Chinatsu and Haryu were engrossed in conversation. Hina continued walking and said she bet they were just friends. After all, she and Taiki were walking home together, and they were just friends. Taiki laughed and agreed, saying there was nothing weird about walking home together. They tried to convince each other that it was indeed just that. However, the next day, Chinatsu and Haryu were seen talking again in the gym. Taiki was shocked by this, and Kyo remarked that what else could he expect since they were both MVPs. Hina mentioned that she heard they were in the same class and even sat next to each other. Moreover, both Chinatsu and Haryu had been chosen as class representatives. Taiki couldn't accept this and said he didn't know those words. Hina commented that it's because he was in a completely different cultural sphere. But she told him not to worry, as Chinatsu herself had said she wanted to focus on the team. Taiki said that might be true, but one couldn't stop a person from falling for someone. He imagined the possibility of them being in a relationship, cheering for each other across the net. Hina remarked that it sounded right, but Kyo thought it sounded like something from a TV show. Unable to accept this, Taiki pulled Kyo away, saying they should go practice. Kyo responded that their club was about to start, but Taiki insisted on going anyway. On the sidelines, the coaches were talking, and one asked the other about his thoughts on the players this year. The badminton coach replied that their main forces were the third years plus Haryu. He said Haryu was on a different level on his own and had the potential to reach the top at the national level. However, he personally admitted that he had high hopes for someone else. He was referring to Taiki, who was busy practicing. The students were playing continuously inside when suddenly a basketball bounced into the badminton area. Chinatsu said it was hers and was surprised to see it was Taiki who had caught it. He was also embarrassed when he saw her. Taiki handed her the ball, thinking that every time he saw her, he remembered what happened yesterday. He started to leave immediately after handing it over, but Chinatsu stopped him and asked how long he would be practicing today. Surprised, Taiki listened as Chinatsu explained that she had left her house key behind, and everyone at home said they wouldn't be there. Taiki replied that he would finish at 7 p.m. In his mind, he worried that someone might have overheard them talking about this. Chinatsu said that was perfect because she would also be there until 7. Suddenly, someone called out to Chinatsu as Chi, and it turned out to be Haryu. He asked if the girls' basketball team had an extra timer because theirs was broken. When Chinatsu replied that she didn't think they did, Taiki couldn't believe that Haryu was calling her Chi. Chinatsu then asked Haryu if he had approached the volleyball team, to which Haryu replied they didn't have one either. Meanwhile, Taiki was still in disbelief at what he had heard. That evening, after training, Taiki couldn't stop thinking about what happened earlier, feeling jealous. While running home, he thought about how close Haryu and Chinatsu must be for him to call her Chi. Meanwhile, he couldn't even say Chinatsu's name without adding senpai at the end. He recalled Chinatsu's reaction, which seemed normal to her. Taiki wondered what he needed to do to casually call her Chi too. Was it because they were in the same grade or sat next to each other in class? Or maybe it was a mutual understanding as the best players on their teams. Out of breath from running, Taiki lay down at the entrance of their house upon arriving home. He thought about how lame he was and questioned what good would come from thinking like this. He then was sure his mother would be annoyed if he fell asleep on the floor. Taiki couldn't stop his thoughts. What could he do? It was impossible for him to join Chinatsu's grade. And even if she allowed him to call her Chi, he felt he couldn't do it. If only they didn't live in the same house, or weren't so close that he could call her by her first name, he wouldn't have to worry about this. While lying down, he mentioned her name, but then suddenly shouted senpai when he heard she had returned home. Chinatsu asked what was wrong, and he nervously replied that it was nothing. Taiki felt awkward and thought of himself as a creep, a mix of lameness and creepiness. When she entered the house, Chinatsu commented on how quickly Taiki had returned home. She said that when she was leaving, all the badminton players were just heading to the clubroom. She remembered he said he'd be there until 7 p.m. but figured they were behind schedule. Taiki sat down, thinking what a mess he was. She had mentioned all the badminton players, but all he could imagine was that she meant Haryu. He quickly stood up and apologized, saying he'd go straight to his room, but Chinatsu stopped him, pulling on his clothes. Taiki was nervous and on the verge of tears. Chinatsu said she had something to ask him. She admitted it might be embarrassing if she was wrong, but asked if he had run home. She noticed he was very sweaty and thought that might be the case. She was curious if he had done that so she wouldn't have to wait outside the house for him. Taiki couldn't answer and wondered why Chinatsu had noticed that. She mentioned that she had waited in the clubroom. After Taiki had worried about something as simple as how to address her, knowing that she noticed him made him so happy that he no longer cared what he called her. Chinatsu continued and said that it was a nice save. Blushing, Taiki said that wasn't the reason. He explained that he just thought of training more during his commute to and from school. He stood up and suddenly ran out. He thought that because they were living in the same house, he might be getting the wrong idea. He realized Chinatsu wasn't someone he could simply fight for and win over. When it came to Chinatsu, no matter who she is with or what she's called, if he kept worrying about small things, it would never end. For now, he decided he needed to focus on his club matches. As he ran, Taiki admitted to himself that he might still react to hearing Chi. The next day, the badminton team matches began. Taiki Inomata's teammate invited him to join. Kyo couldn't believe that Taiki had won again and praised him for it. However, Taiki mentioned that most of his opponents were first-year students, so he hadn't really faced the regular players yet. They looked at the scoreboard and saw that Haryu had won all of his matches. Kyo suddenly remembered to ask about the situation regarding Haryu and Chinatsu's closeness. Taiki replied that he no longer cared about whatever was going on between the two, as he had decided not to let his emotions control him. Kyo couldn't believe what Taiki said and asked if he was really okay with it. Even though Haryu called Chinatsu Chi, Taiki told him not to remind him of that. As they were walking, they overheard a conversation. It turned out to be Chinatsu and Haryu, along with other second years. Taiki avoided them and reiterated that he didn't care anymore. Kyo then asked why he was avoiding them if that were true. They heard the group discussing the badminton team matches. Haryu's companion praised him for his winning streak. Haryu responded that it was just so far, to which the seated boy said he was being too modest. Haryu added that there were still many games after that, and those would matter more. Taiki was surprised when Chinatsu wished Haryu good luck, and he thanked her. The girls left, and Taiki once again said he didn't care, though he was visibly hurt. The conversation between Haryu and his companion continued. The companion noticed that Haryu and Chinatsu had been close lately and were always together. Haryu replied that it seemed so, as they sat next to each other. When asked if that was really all there was to it, Haryu confirmed, saying they were both busy with their club activities. Taiki seemed to melt upon hearing this conversation. However, Haryu added that there was something about girls who are passionate about something they really liked. Then his friend asked if he was implying something, but Haryu said he wasn't. Taiki was clearly troubled by what he heard and left, while the conversation inside continued. Kyo thought to himself that this was the worst timing for such a situation. The badminton team matches continued, and this time, Taiki and Haryu were facing each other. Taiki received Haryu's shot, which Haryu then smashed back, causing Taiki to miss. The score was now 5-1. Kyo was speechless while the spectators commented that Haryu was setting the pace of the match and not giving his opponent a chance to go on the offensive. One of them remarked that Haryu was like a total wall. Hina passed by and expressed concern about whether Taiki was okay, as the game seemed one-sided. Kyo responded that this was to be expected, given the difference in their abilities. As it was a first-year versus a second-year match, there was also an experience gap. Hina became worried, while Kyo thought about how difficult this must be for their friend. Taiki's opponent was close to his crush, Chinatsu, and it was possible that they both liked her. Moreover, Haryu was closer to making the national team than Taiki. Kyo thought Haryu's display of their difference in strength seemed to be telling Taiki to give up on both his dreams. Kyo then noticed that Chinatsu was also watching the match. When she was called by her teammate, she left. Back to the match, Taiki again failed to return Haryu's shot, bringing the score to 11-4. The spectators commented that they knew Haryu would win since he was tough, but they hoped someone would be able to defeat him at some point. Taiki was visibly exhausted from the match, so Kyo offered him water and checked on him. Taiki asked if the last one was close, expressing frustration at being late to return to his position. He said that if he didn't maintain his wits about himself, he would slow down quickly. He vowed to do better next time. Kyo then noticed that Taiki seemed unusually amped up. Taiki explained that he had run before the match, but Kyo clarified that wasn't what he meant. He thought Taiki was more focused on something else, like what had happened before. Taiki realized what Kyo was referring to and admitted that thanks to Chinatsu, he wanted to try harder now. However, he didn't want to use her as an excuse if he lost. Furthermore, he emphasized that he wasn't playing badminton just for Chinatsu and that he truly loved the sport. Taiki was called back for the match and returned to the court. In his mind, he acknowledged saying these things now but still felt worried. As he was about to play, he noticed his shoelace had come undone and apologized for taking time to fix it. He was surprised to find the wish ribbon Chinatsu had given him. He tucked it into his sock and thought to himself that he had decided to continue. He needed to advance, at least one step at a time. Upon returning to the match, when Haryu served, Taiki stepped forward and returned it in the opposite direction. The other players were surprised, commenting that it was a good return. Nevertheless, Haryu managed to get it and send it back. Hina cheered for Taiki, and in his mind, Taiki thought about taking one step at a time. Haryu's shot went high, and Chinatsu was watching the match. Just then, Taiki successfully received the shot. A short while later, the match ended. Taiki were so close to beating Haryu, and was complimented on his impressive performance in the second half. Kyo told Taiki that he should be happy while mopping the floor. Even though he lost to Haryu, with his current record, Taiki was sure to make the team. However, Taiki maintained a poker face, and Kyo noticed that he didn't seem happy. Taiki admitted that he wasn't happy because he lost. He felt that even the points he earned in the second half were barely earned. Haryu had set the pace for the entire match. As he threw away the swept-up debris, Taiki said he knew Haryu was tough, but it was still frustrating. Outside, Haryu's friend recounted what Taiki had said, which he apparently overheard. Haryu was surprised, saying that he was the one who felt frustrated. His friend was curious about why, since Haryu had won the match. Haryu started to explain, but then withdrew his statement, saying never mind before leaving. Haryu left with a serious expression, seemingly wanting to know something. That afternoon, as Taiki was walking home, he expected things wouldn't go his way. Moreover, Haryu was his opponent. Whether in skills, speed, or strength, Taiki admitted he was behind in all these areas. He thought he needed to play more aggressively, read his opponents, adjust his returns accordingly, and then pounce on easy shots. He realized he needed more experience to pull this off. However, he felt that practice alone wasn't enough. Suddenly, someone called out to Taiki. It was Chinatsu, who told him to follow her. Taiki was surprised, but Chinatsu said the sun was about to set, so they should hurry. When Taiki asked where they were going, she replied, "Someplace great." Taiki stopped in his tracks upon hearing this. The place Chinatsu was referring to turned out to be the park. Taiki admitted it was a nice place, but was curious why she had brought him there. Chinatsu showed him some rackets, saying she had borrowed them. Taiki wondered why she had done so. Chinatsu asked him to wait and drew a court on the ground using a stick. She reminded Taiki that he had once mentioned they should play sometime, and now this would be their court. Taiki was surprised that she remembered. Chinatsu added that she thought he might want to practice more, noting that she personally feel the most antsy after a match, and so she thought that might be the same for him. Taiki thought to himself that she was right about how he felt. He found it nice to have someone who understood him. They began to play, with Chinatsu serving first. However, she couldn't hit the shuttlecock. She picked it up and tried again. Taiki couldn't help but laugh, commenting that she couldn't even hit it. Chinatsu clarified that she's just bad at serving. Taiki advised her that she was moving her left hand too much and suggested she should just use it to drop the shuttlecock and let the racket do the work. Chinatsu was amazed by this advice. Taiki laughed again at her reaction. Chinatsu said this was what she expected from a member of the badminton team. At this rate, she remarked, their game might turn into a practice session for her. Taiki said that was okay, as he had hit the shuttlecock many times during his match earlier. While playing, Chinatsu mentioned that she had watched Taiki's match against Haryu. Taiki asked her to forget about that match, explaining that it was embarrassing for him because he lost. Chinatsu disagreed, saying that towards the end, Taiki had executed some solid smashes. Taiki agreed but said it didn't matter. Chinatsu pointed out that during the interval of the second set, the score was 11-4, but by the time it reached 21 points from there, Haryu had scored 10 while Taiki had scored 11. This made Taiki pause and count. Nevertheless, he insisted that a loss was still a loss. The fact that he barely scored in the first half said a lot about his ability. No matter how much he scored in the second half, the result was still a defeat. Chinatsu laughed at this, which puzzled Taiki. He asked why she was laughing, and so Chinatsu apologized and said that Taiki was very competitive. She explained that when his moves were pointed out during practice, like being told not to hit using only his upper body, but to use his legs as well, he would work on it in the next morning's practice. And in his match against Haryu, because he didn't give up, he managed to score a lot in the second half. So, she believed it would be okay. Taiki then felt embarrassed and uncomfortable with the compliments. Chinatsu reassured him not to worry, saying it would surely be fine. Taiki thought to himself that due to his lack of ability, he found it difficult to believe in himself. He told Chinatsu that next time, he would win. And yet he couldn't believe how easy it was to believe anything said by the person he liked. Chinatsu cheered him up, saying that was the spirit. They were suddenly interrupted by Chinatsu's phone ringing. The message was from Yukiko, Taiki's mother, asking what time they would be home. However, Chinatsu's keychain caught Taiki's attention. It was personalized with chi written on it. He thought Haryu must have had it customized made as a gift for her. But Chinatsu explained that she got it from her classmates. All her classmates called her Chi, and so Taiki was surprised by this revelation. It meant that Haryu wasn't the only one who called her Chi, and in his mind he thought about how approachable Chinatsu really was. Taiki also realized that, at this point, romance probably wasn't on Chinatsu's mind at all. When Chinatsu suggested they head home, Taiki told her to go ahead. He explained that there was a lot of foot traffic on the way. Feeling embarrassed, he admitted that while it might not matter to Chinatsu, for him, walking home with a girl was somewhat embarrassing. So, he said he would stay behind to practice his swings. As she watched him, Chinatsu pondered Taiki's words. She thought to herself, that's how it looks to him. In the next scene, Taiki seemed surprised by what he saw, which was the list of the doubles nationals qualifiers participating members, where Taiki's name was written paired with Haryu. He couldn't believe that Haryu was his partner, and Kyo said it was a relief that Taiki wasn't his partner because Taiki would hog all the shots, and he wouldn't have a chance. Taiki said that was harsh, and his goal from that point on was to defeat Haryu. Kyo said it was true that it would be awkward for Taiki to be partnered with his love rival at the Nationals, and Taiki was left speechless. Taiki then said to disregard his feelings for Chinatsu, and he was about to say something else, but Haryu suddenly called him, saying they should practice. Taiki was surprised but agreed with what Haryu said, and Haryu thought they would start by running the perimeter. He told Taiki that he would start him on the training regimen he created, and Taiki seemed relieved that Haryu hadn't heard what he said about Chinatsu. However, Haryu suddenly asked him if he has a crush on Chinatsu, which shocked Taiki, who thought this was the worst possible start with a doubles partner. They started practicing, and someone shouted that it was too slow. It was Haryu, telling Taiki that his swings and footwork were lagging. Then, there were some spectators who called Haryu a Spartan because he was still practicing after running, circuit training, and footwork exercises. One of them said that if it were him, he would be throwing up by now. Back to Haryu and Taiki. Haryu said that Taiki was finally tired. He added that if it was too hard for Taiki, he should just say so because he couldn't collapse on him, and Taiki was about to agree, but Haryu said he hadn't seen Chi complain on the court yet. He also said that whoever Chinatsu dates should be as impressive as her, and Taiki pretended not to know what Haryu was talking about. Taiki asked what they would do next, and Haryu answered that they would do doubles knocking practice, 5 reps of 2 minutes each. Let's move to another place in the school, Class 1B, where Taiki was sprawled on his desk. Hina said he looked like a mushroom growing from the desk, and Kyo said it didn't look nutritious, so Taiki told him to be quiet. We learned that in the past week, Taiki had gone through a gauntlet, and his stamina was put to the test. So he said that the classroom was the only place where he could rest. Mina asked if it wasn't at home, and Kyo said he didn't expect Haryu to do so much for Taiki because he thought Haryu would only look out for himself even though they were teammates. Mina asked if Haryu was the guy who walked home with Chinatsu the other night, and she said it might be Haryu's way of telling Taiki not to make a move on his girl. She added that Haryu might be trying to make Taiki give up by showing the difference in their status, which made Taiki imagine Haryu wearing princely clothes, telling him they were from different worlds. He said that the truth was he felt a difference between them, because even though they were doing the same regimen, Haryu never slowed down, and his shots were always accurate. He added that it must be fun to play badminton with such a solid foundation of strength. Mina called him a badminton nut, and Kyo called him a masochist, so he told them both it was slander. The scene returned to the gym, and Taiki was practicing when Haryu called him, asking why he attacked with a cross shot. He explained that his opponent was setting up for a backhand, and the speed of the shuttlecock wouldn't slow down in a straight shot. He also said that even though the position was awkward for Taiki, he should use a straight shot, because if Taiki only attacked in ways that were easy for him, he wouldn't improve, and Taiki agreed with him. Taiki said that now that Haryu mentioned it, he noticed he was doing that bad habit, and Haryu had no response. After that, Taiki went home with Kyo, and we can see that he was having trouble walking, even though he had a walking stick. He said he survived another day. They talked about getting a drink, then decided for a Coke and ginger ale. Then, someone called Taiki, and it was Haryu, who praised him for what he did that day. Taiki replied with "you too," and he noticed that Haryu was with the second years and Chinatsu. Haryu told his companions that Taiki was paired with him in doubles, and Taiki wondered why Haryu was talking about him at that moment. Haryu explained that Taiki was a first year and totally terrible. He said Taiki's reactions to shots were poor, and his offense was so out of control that he often hit himself in the foot. Taiki had nothing to say because it was all true. However, Haryu said he thought Taiki would get stronger, which surprised him. He explained that even though he was making it very hard for Taiki, he never gave up. He said he gave Taiki a somewhat overloaded regimen that he wasn't sure Taiki could handle, but he did it, and Taiki looked very surprised. One of Haryu's companions said he was sadistic, and another said Haryu was tough on people he had expectations for. While the others are talking, Taiki was satisfied that Haryu sees potential in him. Taiki heard someone asking Nishida if it was true that Haryu ignored people he didn't care about. While Haryu's companions were laughing and talking, the only thing Taiki noticed was Chinatsu, who was telling him he was doing well. Taiki was dazed, and he thought it might not be so bad to be recognized by the older kids for his ability. At that moment, Haryu noticed something on his phone, and he said his girlfriend had texted him. Taiki responded happily, but suddenly realized what Haryu said about him having a girlfriend, who said it had been since last week. He explained that he had liked this girl for a long time, but said that she's involved in showbiz. So he almost lost hope, but she suddenly asked him out. He added that his girlfriend was impressive because she had been working diligently towards her dreams since she was a child, and Taiki still couldn't believe it. Then, Haryu thanked Chinatsu for accompanying him to buy makeup, which his girlfriend had asked for. Taiki thought that Haryu had told him these things knowingly, and Haryu said it looked like it would be a long time before Taiki got a girlfriend. Because of that, Taiki got annoyed again. A month has passed since Chinatsu started living in the Inomata household. We then suddenly hear a beeping sound coming from the house. We learn that it's the alarm of the sleepy person, Taiki. He got up, and Chinatsu greeted him good morning at the dining table. Taiki said his eyes had gotten used to being dazzled by Chinatsu's radiance. Yukiko told the two young ones that she had washed their gym uniforms, so they should make sure to bring them. We see Chinatsu eating calmly, while Taiki is in a hurry. He said he pressed the snooze button on his alarm 5 times, but recently, he's been stopping at the second snooze. After eating, he hurriedly packed his things for school, and he said it's nice to have a crush on someone. In Class 1B, Kyo was explaining about Taiki and Chinatsu's living conditions and how there's nothing happening yet even though they are living under the same roof. Taiki was about to explain why, but suddenly his phone rang, and we see that Chinatsu had texted him. Taiki was very surprised, and Kyo seemed to not believe that Taiki had gotten Chinatsu's number. Chinatsu asked if Taiki could check if he accidentally took her gym uniform, and when Taiki looked, he saw that he had indeed taken Chinatsu's because her name was on the uniform. Taiki trembled because of this, and Chinatsu said she had gym in the 5th period. So Taiki said he'd bring it right away and asked where they should meet. They wanted a place without a lot of people and decided on the AV room. Taiki thought to himself that in his hurry, he probably didn't notice it, and he said they couldn't be seen by other people, so he'd be quick in giving it. At that moment, Haryu saw Taiki and asked why he was avoiding him. Taiki answered that it wasn't his intention, just an unconscious reflex. Haryu said Taiki's timing was perfect and pulled him along, while saying they should have midday practice. He said he had lunch early, so he was bored, and Taiki asked if everything was always about Haryu. Taiki said he couldn't practice because he had something to take care of, so Haryu asked if there was anything more important than badminton. Taiki was surprised by that question, so he asked Haryu if there was nothing more important than badminton for him. Haryu answered that badminton, his girlfriend, and Monster Hunter were all important to him, and these things couldn't be compared, which made Taiki look incredulous. Haryu said they should start, but Taiki left, saying he'd just put in extra effort during team practice. Due to Taiki's hurry, Haryu wondered what was going on, while Taiki thought that if Haryu talked to him, he wouldn't be able to leave. Then, Taiki arrived at the AV room, saying there were usually no people there, but Hina was there with someone. Taiki asked what Hina was doing there, and Hina answered that there was a rhythmic gymnastics club meeting there, which surprised Taiki. Hina then asked if Taiki needed anything, but he said no, and he dropped the gym uniform. Hina was about to pick it up, but Taiki told her not to move, because if she picked it up, she'd see the name, so he said not to touch it. Hina asked why not, and continued to pick up the uniform. So Taiki was forced to say that the uniform hadn't been washed since the summer of his junior high. Because of that, Hina immediately told him to leave, and he complied, but Hina stopped him to ask how it hadn't been washed when he always wore it. Taiki said that the truth was, he wore it without washing it. So Hina was disgusted again and told him to leave. Taiki was annoyed that there are people wherever he goes, because in this situation, Hina would wear his uniform and he was running out of time. Chinatsu messaged again, which surprised Taiki, because Chinatsu said they should meet on the rooftop at the west exit side, where there was a keep out sign on the stairs. Taiki arrived there, not sure if he was on the right rooftop, and opened the door. Chinatsu said that Taiki made it and was pleased that they were able to meet safe and sound. While handing Chinatsu her uniform, Taiki asked how Chinatsu got the key to the rooftop, and she answered that she borrowed it from her friend in the astronomy club. Chinatsu thanked him, and Taiki said not to mention it, to which Chinatsu said he was a lifesaver. Taiki thought that this was Chinatsu at school, and we see that there was an awkward moment between the two. Then, the school bell rang, and Taiki told Chinatsu that if she didn't hurry, she'd be late. Chinatsu started changing while Taiki was still there, so Taiki asked what she was doing. Chinatsu said there was no time left, so she just changed there, and Taiki couldn't believe it. Chinatsu added that it was okay, because girls in athletic clubs were used to changing clothes anywhere, but for Taiki, that wasn't the problem. Taiki said he'd go inside to keep watch in case anyone came, and Chinatsu apologized. According to Taiki, he always thought about this, but Chinatsu was too lax about these things, and he wondered if she even knew how pretty she was. Taiki heard Chinatsu changing clothes, and he said it wasn't good, because he was imagining things because of those sounds. Taiki's heart started beating faster, and this happened while Chinatsu was changing, so he seemed to be having a hard time. Nevertheless, Chinatsu finished, thanked him for waiting, and asked if he was okay. Taiki answered that if it had lasted 10 more seconds, he would have been in trouble, and Chinatsu didn't get it. She said they should leave, but Taiki said she can go on ahead. Chinatsu thanked him again, and Taiki had no response. He thought that Chinatsu had changed even though he was there, as if she didn't realize he was a dude. At that moment, he thought he needed to work on his manliness, and he suddenly remembered he had a class. The class ended, and Taiki invited Haryu to practice, but Haryu was annoyed with him. The athletes' practice ended, and someone said their practice was good that day. Someone asked if somebody got the shuttlecocks, and another asked what time they would meet tomorrow morning. We see the badminton players changing, and someone was disgusted by the shoes he saw. Then, someone called Taiki's name, and it was Hina, asking if the regional preliminaries would start tomorrow. She told Taiki not to get too excited and embarrass himself by tripping. Taiki replied telling Hina to butt out. She replied that she just asked Kyo to video record him. Haryu wanted to ask Taiki something, but Taiki beat him to it, saying it wasn't like that, so Haryu just said okay. According to Haryu, Taiki shouldn't get too worked up because he was his doubles partner, so they wouldn't lose. Taiki said Haryu was really confident, and Haryu added that Taiki just needed to make it to the top 16 in singles next week. Taiki answered that he'd be okay, and he was stronger compared to before, so he thought he might make it to the top 8 or 4. Because of that, Haryu said he'd tell him now, and he said that Taiki had forgotten his racket bag. Taiki asked why Haryu was only telling him now, and Haryu replied that he was wondering how long it would take Taiki to notice. Because of that, Taiki left to get his bag. In the next scene, someone told Taiki to make sure he packed his uniform and not to forget his shoes and racket. That person was Taiki's mother, and Taiki thought that when he looked at his mother, he remembers that he really is her son. Yukiko asked if Taiki needed 8 towels, and he replied that he didn't need that many. Taiki said he had everything he needed, and he thanked his mother for the uniform, and Yukiko asked if Taiki was sure about that. At that moment, Taiki dropped the water he was holding, and it spilled on his uniform. So his mother got angry and ordered him to put it in the wash and get a towel. It was night, and Taiki was lying face down on his bed. He asked himself what was wrong with him, because it wasn't his first high school match, as he had played in several tournaments before. So why was he so nervous? Taiki was trying to calm himself, because if he played in that state and lost due to a small mistake, he wouldn't be able to accept it. While thinking about his memories with Chinatsu of dreaming about joining the Nationals, he said there was no reason for him to be too pressured. Because of that, he shouted into his pillow, then stood up to get his racket and went outside. There, he practiced his swing without a shuttlecock, and he explained that when he worries, he works out. He said he was going to the Nationals, so he needed to keep sharp. Then, someone asked him if he was practicing so late, and it was Chinatsu, who said it was a bit cold. Taiki said he just felt like moving around by swinging his racket. Chinatsu then called Taiki, and she told him his clothes were inside out. So Taiki quickly took them off to turn them right side out, but he noticed Chinatsu was looking at him, seemingly dazed. Taiki realized he was changing in front of Chinatsu, so he quickly apologized. However, he thought that Chinatsu didn't care about changing in front of him, but when he did it, Chinatsu freaked out. Then, Chinatsu wanted to say something to Taiki, which was that Taiki apparently had six-pack abs, so he got embarrassed, and he said that's what Chinatsu had to bring up. Chinatsu then said it was probably the result of Taiki's strength training, and she added that according to Haru, Taiki was getting jacked. Taiki replied that just because he had muscles, it didn't mean he had gotten better at badminton. Chinatsu seemed surprised by Taiki's answer, and she said that was humble of him, but Taiki said he wouldn't call it humble. At that moment, Chinatsu told Taiki to come closer, so Taiki asked what was up. Chinatsu tapped Taiki's head while saying the word Hyaku, which seemed to surprise Taiki. Chinatsu explained that it was a pressure point on the head, and pressing it should relax a person. She added that there was no point in freaking out before his match, and it was a fact that Taiki had worked hard to reach the Nationals. She told him not to think about other things and just show what he had. She asked Taiki if he understood, and Taiki said yes, adding that the pressure point really worked. Chinatsu then said that besides that, there's still next year, and the year after that, but Taiki thought that in 2 years, Chinatsu would graduate, while she was telling Taiki he would get even better. Taiki said that wasn't enough, which surprised Chinatsu. Then, Taiki's face became serious and went into the house, saying goodnight to Chinatsu, who didn't expect Taiki's reaction. The day of the Nationals arrived, and Taiki was hyped for that day. Haru said that it seemed Taiki had overcome his nervousness, and Taiki said he had no time to be nervous. Haru seemed pleased with Taiki's reaction. We see the inside of the Badminton Nationals Preliminaries arena, and someone announces that the doubles matches will begin, so the players should listen for their numbers. Taiki and Haru continued winning, until they advanced to the top 16. Taiki looks confused, and Haru says they won't lose in the regional preliminaries while he's there, even though Taiki's shortcomings are very obvious. As Haru is saying this, we see a man hand him a clipboard, asking him to sign something because they're the winning team. Taiki thinks Haru has a point because in the actual games, Haru saved him many times. Then, he suddenly hears someone shouting, "Take that," and it's a player with a mohawk. Taiki thought he was loud, and his play is very exaggerated, like the play he was about to make, which Taiki wonders if it was a push shot. The guy with the mohawk takes a shot, and according to Taiki, the guy was just deceiving his opponents, and it's surprising how level-headed he is. He turns in Taiki's direction, while shouting another one down, and Haru says they should leave, but the guy calls out Harry to one of them. It turns out he wanted to call Kin Go Haru, who he says used to be from KTS Jr., but Haru says he's got the wrong person. The guy calls Haru a crook while trying to kick him, but Haru dodges. Taiki asks if they know each other, and Haru answers that the guy was his teammate when he was in junior. That guy is Shimadami High's very own, Ichiro Kishisho. Taiki tells Haru that Ichiro called him a crook, and Haru says he doesn't know why. According to Ichiro, Haruyu didn't keep his promise, which was to give him Chinatsu's contact information. Taiki is surprised by what he heard, and Haruyu says he would do it if Ichiro beat him, and Ichiro replies that he did, but Haruyu argues that it should be in an official match, and the person he was with then wasn't his actual partner. Taiki asks Ichiro if he knows Chinatsu, and Ichiro says yes. He'll never forget when he went to Aime's cultural festival last year. We're taken back to that time, and Ichiro's wallet is missing. He says it was a limited edition, so he wondered what he would do, but at that moment, a girl called him, and it was Chinatsu, who handed him his wallet, which had a design of a girl who looked like Chinatsu. We return to the present, and Ichiro says he thought his anime crush had come to life from his wallet. Taiki asks what anime it was, but Haruyu told him not to show interest. Then, Ichiro says that after Chinatsu returned his wallet, he learned that she was Haruyu's friend, so he asked Haruyu to introduce him to Chinatsu, but he never heard back. He adds that it was very cruel, and Taiki seems to be getting annoyed with him, saying he owes Haruyu. Ichiro says he'll crush Haruyu in double so that Haruyu will introduce him to Chinatsu, but suddenly someone calls him, calling him Kishi, and says his stomach hurts because he ate some cake, not knowing how old it was. Kishi's partner falls to his knees due to stomach pain and leaves. Haruyu says it's good that he lasted through the preliminaries. Because of that, Kishi says they'll fight in the singles preliminaries next week, but Haruyu says he won't play there because the Rookie of the Year can skip the regional preliminaries. Kishi asks when their next official match will be, and Haruyu answers that it's at the prefectural qualifiers in June, which Kishi can't believe. Kishi says he'll borrow a sub, so they can fight right then, but Haruyu doesn't agree. However, Kishi insists, so Haruyu finally agrees. Nevertheless, Haruyu changes the condition of their deal, saying that if Kishi beats Taiki in singles next week, he'll give him Chinatsu's contact info, but he'll ask Chinatsu first if it's okay. Kishi wonders who Taiki is, so Haruyu points him out. Kishi observes Taiki, and confidently says he's already won, which surprises Taiki. Kishi leaves happily, and Taiki seems to be getting angry at him. Then, Haruyu told Taiki to watch out, because though he may not look like it, Kishi is tough. Taiki seems pissed, and called Haruyu a jerk in his mind. In the next scene, Taiki is home, and he wonders why this happened to him, after he was so happy winning doubles. He adds that he doesn't like the idea of giving Chinatsu's contact info to Kishi, but he was forced to agree to it. When he's opening the door, he hears someone talking, and he realizes it's Chinatsu's voice. However, he thinks he can't face Chinatsu, maybe because his attitude yesterday left a bad taste in her mouth. He adds that he was so hung up on the nationals this year, and he hears someone say that Taiki seems to have one, and they sound happy for him. Then, Chinatsu says Taiki has been working really hard at practice, and according to Yukiko, even at home, Taiki still practices with his racket instead of doing homework, so he should win. She adds that she also prepared tonkatsu to celebrate, so it would be awkward if Taiki lost and came home to a celebration dinner. In truth, she says she's worried about Taiki because he's pushing himself too hard, and Taiki still has 2 years, so she doesn't understand why he's in such a hurry. Me too, says Chinatsu, and she says she also told Taiki that he still has next year, and the year after that, but after she said that, Taiki seemed to become strange. Yukiko asks if he was stranger than usual, but Chinatsu answers that she understands why Taiki is upset. She just realized that it seemed like she was saying, "Who cares if you lose this year?" Taiki hears this and thinks it's true, but he just felt down when he was reminded of the difference in their time at school. Yukiko asks if that wasn't Chinatsu's intention, and she answers no, so Yukiko tells Chinatsu not to worry. Chinatsu replies that it's true, but she realized how time passed in the past year. She says she's envious of Taiki whenever she thinks that she only has 1 year left. At that moment, Chinatsu admits that her words weren't meant to cheer up Taiki because she was just broadcasting her own insecurities, and she felt bad about it. Then, Yukiko says Chinatsu is a kind child, but Chinatsu denies it, and at that moment, someone says they're home. It's Taiki, and his mother welcomes him back. His mother congratulates him, and he thanks her. His mother also says his partner is good, but Taiki said that's because he played well too. He adds that he'll also win the singles tournament, so Yukiko tells him he doesn't need to brag. Taiki says he'll put away his things so he leaves, and his mother says what a busy young man he is. Then, Taiki thinks that if Chinatsu is worried, it's just another reason for him not to lose. Yukiko says she doesn't know where Taiki's confidence comes from, but that's just how her son is, so Chinatsu shouldn't let it get to her. And Chinatsu replies that she won't. In fact, Chinatsu says she can learn from Taiki. A week had passed, and Kishi and Taiki shook hands, signaling the start of their match. Haru, Kyo, and other members of their badminton team were watching. They noticed that both players were going all out, even though it was just rock, paper, scissors to determine who would serve first. Kyo brought up that he had heard Haru had placed a strange bet on this match. Haru replied that it would be fine. If Chinatsu didn't want it, he wouldn't give her information. However, Kyo thought to himself that, knowing Chinatsu, she would prioritize others. But Haru was confident that Taiki would win the match, which surprised Kyo. He said it was certain, after all the training Haru had put him through. In fact, if Taiki lost, he said he would receive a special training regimen. Taiki shuddered on the court when he mentioned that. Because of this, Kyo thought to himself that he was lucky not to be Haru's partner. The umpire gave the signal and called out "Love all, play." The game had begun. Taiki and Kishi were serious in their exchange of shots. Kyo noticed that Kishi's smashes were very intense. Haru explained that Kishi was good at putting his weight into them. Therefore, Taiki needed to do more than just return the shots. Taiki missed a shot, causing Kishi to celebrate while Taiki remained serious. Haru shouted at him to shake it off. Someone found them there, and it turned out to be the girls' basketball team. When Haru asked why they were there, one of them answered that they had a practice game against Kita High nearby, and they had heard that the badminton team was having a tournament. They asked who was playing, and Haru replied that it was his first-year partner. Surprised, they said they would cheer for him. And so, Chinatsu looked at the game. The match between the two continued, and it appeared that Taiki was falling behind his opponent. The girls' basketball team became concerned, wondering if their presence was causing this. Haru asked if they were among those who thought their watching messed up the team they were observing. He clarified that this might be Taiki's strategy. He explained that it takes time to get used to the speed of others' smashes. Taiki knew he was slow in getting back up. Therefore, he might be using the first part of the game just to return the shuttlecock while waiting for his opponent to tire out. If they observed carefully, his returns were solid to make the opponent move around. Finally, Haru said he was using his head a bit. Kyo's match number was called, so he excused himself and Haru wished him good luck. However, as he climbed the stairs, he noticed Chinatsu. He asked if she wouldn't watch up close. She said no, she would stay in the back. Kyo then admitted that he knew about their situation, that they were living together because Taiki had told him. Chinatsu replied that Taiki trusted him, which is why he confided in him. When Taiki missed a shot from his opponent, Chinatsu became worried and grabbed the railing. While Kyo was beside her, he was surprised to realize how cute she actually was. Chinatsu said that tournaments were really nerve-wracking. There was weight in every shot. Kyo peeked at the match and asked Chinatsu if she knew that her contact information was hanging in the balance. Chinatsu was shocked by this. Kyo added that, for her information, Haru had proposed this, so she should direct any complaints to him. But he said that even if Taiki won, there was nothing extra for him. So he asked Chinatsu that if Taiki won, if she could take him to the aquarium or something. Chinatsu was puzzled by this statement. Kyo said they didn't have gym tomorrow, so they had no scheduled practice. Besides, the reason Taiki was trying so hard was because of her influence. Chinatsu replied that she didn't have that kind of influence on others. All of that was due to Taiki's hard work. But Kyo said she was very influential, and Taiki was the type to be easily influenced. He recalled the many times Taiki had shared about Chinatsu pursuing her goal of going to nationals, even if it meant being left alone in Japan, or how she practiced very early, so Taiki did the same. Kyo added that Taiki was always reckless once he had decided on something. But recently, even Taiki's friends could say that he was putting in extraordinary effort now. The exchange of shots between Taiki and Kishi in the match was intense. Kyo commented that he thought the old Taiki wouldn't have been able to get those shots. The strategy centered on returning shots was probably something he couldn't do before. So as they watched, he said both Taiki's skills and physical ability were steadily growing. and he was confident that it was because someone close to him had a similar goal. He thought that was why Taiki was so disciplined. So, if Taiki won today, he thought he deserved a little reward. Chinatsu fell silent as she watched Taiki giving his all in the match against Kishi. Finally, Taiki had a chance to overtake his opponent, which surprised Kishi. Chinatsu was shocked, and Taiki was overjoyed because of it. Kyo thought his friend was really fired up, and suddenly Chinatsu responded, saying okay, if Taiki won, they would go to the aquarium. The match was a close fight with the score at 19-20. Both Taiki and Kishi were visibly tired, but Kishi thought to himself that he needed just one more point, so he couldn't make a mistake. He would do everything to get that point. To end the match, he attempted a net kill, hitting the shuttlecock close to the net to challenge Taiki. However, Taiki managed to return it with a backhand shot to the rear. Surprised, Kishi quickly moved to receive it but couldn't reach it. Taiki's shot was in, and even he seemed unable to believe what had happened. It was extremely close. If Kishi had made a push shot, Taiki was sure he wouldn't have gotten it. Kishi was out of breath and sweating profusely from the match. He looked at Taiki and approached him. He said they should play again sometime, and the two shook hands. Taiki agreed, and Kishi said next time he'd come to Ame for a practice match. They both agreed to this. Kishi then ran off, telling Taiki to check the basketball team's practice days. At this point, he said he'd be the one making efforts to see Chinatsu. Taiki was surprised that Kishi hadn't given up yet. Meanwhile, Haru noticed that although it wasn't obvious, Kishi must be crushed by his loss. After the match, Nishida laughed and said if Taiki had beaten him, he might have taken first place. He added that there were still prefectural qualifiers, so Taiki should stay committed to practice. Kyo then commented that Nishida was a bad match for him. Nevertheless, he was still one of the top second years. Suddenly, Hina called Taiki Seki because he got second place. Annoyed, he told her not to give him weird nicknames. But Hina replied that next time, his aim should be to become firstski. Taiki said that didn't sound good either. Hina said she had heard about his match and praised him for putting up a good fight, even though he was just a first year. Taiki thought to himself that it wasn't a big deal. But Hina added that for Taiki, it was impressive. Taiki asked why she was patronizing him. She answered that now he could participate in the prefectural tournament. He agreed, and so he needed to become even more. He didn't finish his sentence as he read a message he received. It was from Chinatsu, inviting him to go to the aquarium tomorrow. But she said no pressure since she knew he was tired. All three of them read the message, and Taiki was so surprised that he dropped his cell phone. Hina suddenly became curious about when he and Chinatsu had become close. Taiki couldn't answer, so Kyo admitted that he had requested this from Chinatsu. Kyo clarified that he had seen Chinatsu watching the match earlier, which surprised Taiki. He added that the condition of the match was that the winner would be introduced to Chinatsu. Although he wasn't sure if she would agree, he asked her if it was okay for her and Taiki to go out if he won. Hina was stunned at first, then squealed with excitement because this would be his first date. Taiki was confused when he heard it called a date, as Chinatsu had only done it because Kyo had asked. But Hina replied that it was impossible for her to go to the aquarium with just the two of them solely because of that. Hina was then called away, but before leaving, she reminded Taiki that since it was his first date, he should make sure to wash his clothes before going. Taiki couldn't believe this and wanted to clarify things, but Hina had already left, wishing him good luck. In her thoughts, she couldn't believe he was really making strides. Because of that, she was happy for him. Her companion then asked if she was mad about something. Hina wondered why she said that and asked if she had gained half a kilo. She replied that would set her off. That afternoon, upon returning home, Taiki paced outside. He said he couldn't go inside because he was so nervous. He thought he couldn't look Chinatsu in the eye. He did some push-ups and thought that maybe Chinatsu was just trying to show her gratitude as his housemate. He was sure there was no other reason for it. Suddenly, the door opened and his mother called him inside. Taiki looked around for Chinatsu, but they said she was already in her room. He just said okay, but truthfully, he had wanted to see her. That night, Taiki read a book about aquatic animals. He learned that porcupine fish have 350 to 400 needles and 95% of a jellyfish's body is water. He couldn't settle down and was irritated with Kyo. He wished Kyo had set this up for a month later. Looking at his messy bed, he thought he couldn't even decide what to wear. He was curious about what Chinatsu would wear tomorrow, hoping to see her in a dress. He shook his head, telling himself not to expect too much as it wasn't a date. If he had to label it, it was more like a family outing. He suddenly heard a thud from the other room and was startled. He realized Chinatsu was still awake, which made his heart race. Because of what he heard, he couldn't help but hope. Taiki blushed and hoped against hope. The next day, Taiki's alarm rang repeatedly. He scratched his head as he woke up, wondering when he had fallen asleep. Looking at the clock, he realized it was already 9:34 a.m. He needed 15 minutes to prepare and 20 minutes to travel to their meeting place. He shouted that he had overslept, so he hurried and rushed out. He ran to the train station, annoyed that this happened on such an important day. Entering the train, he thought about the point of waking up early every day if he couldn't do it today. He couldn't stay still inside the train. A few moments later, he arrived at Ikebukuro Station. He stopped suddenly when his wallet fell out of his bag, causing his coins to spill. He sat down and picked up his money while trying to calm himself. He was convincing himself that this wasn't a date. Someone handed him a coin and asked if he was okay. It was Chinatsu, all dolled up, and Taiki could only thank her. She smiled at him and asked if there was a problem. He replied there wasn't, but in his mind, he thought that his wish for her to wear a dress had come true. They had already seen the sign pointing to the Sunlight Aquarium, so Chinatsu called out to Taiki, saying that's where they were going. It seemed Cupid had struck Taiki's heart when she called him. He was happy to see her more excited than usual, and moreover, she was wearing a dress. He had never seen her like that before. Taiki talked to himself, telling himself not to have weird expectations, but he thought it might be okay to consider this a date. Chinatsu was delighted when she saw the small fish in the large aquarium and found them incredibly cute. For Taiki, as he gazed at her, Chinatsu was the one who was extremely cute. He wondered what Chinatsu really felt about their outing. It seemed more likely that Chinatsu simply wanted to visit the aquarium. He thought she wouldn't suddenly get angry at him for being part of the bet, although he wouldn't blame her if that was her reaction. So he asked the fish in the aquarium what they thought. Suddenly, Chinatsu called him, and he was surprised when she took out a camera and photographed him. Taiki felt embarrassed, while Chinatsu smiled. When he asked why she did that, she replied it was for a keepsake. He begged her to delete it, but she refused. She said she needed something to remember that day. Taiki thought to himself, what was there to commemorate? As they wandered around the place, Taiki thought he might cry if Chinatsu said she just happened to want to come there. Chinatsu was then delighted by the mascot at the venue and approached it as if to hug it. This made Taiki hate whoever was inside that costume. The two were amazed when they saw the seahorse in the aquarium, as well as the penguins. They were impressed, and Chinatsu commented on how cute and pudgy they were. Taiki was curious about what she meant. Chinatsu said she wanted to take the penguins and pinch their sides. Taiki asked if she thought penguins would feel cold to touch. He then looked at Chinatsu, who was also looking at him. Taiki looked away, feeling unable to meet her eyes. A child running behind them was called Masaki by his mother. She warned him because he hadn't noticed he might bump into someone behind him. However, it was too late, and he collided with Chinatsu. This caused her to be pushed sideways towards Taiki. Their hands touched because of this. The child's mother apologized profusely for her son's mischief, and Chinatsu replied that it was okay, just asking him to be careful. On the side, Taiki blushed and thought that next time, he wanted to return to that place as a legitimate couple, while Chinatsu said goodbye to the mother and child. Taiki was serious and thought that he couldn't tell her his feelings yet. Besides, the nationals were still quite far away. If Chinatsu's housemate told her that he had a crush on her, it might make things awkward. So he suggested that they head home soon. Chinatsu hadn't expected this. Taiki started walking away, but Chinatsu pulled him back by his back. He wondered why she always seemed to be pulling him like this. Chinatsu apologized to him. Though embarrassed, she admitted that she had something she wanted to tell him now. Taiki was curious and asked if it really had to be at the aquarium and right now. He blushed and asked what it was. In his mind, he wondered if Chinatsu might have the same feelings as him. She then bowed her head and apologized to him. Taiki couldn't understand why. Chinatsu was silent for a moment before explaining that she was sorry for what happened the other day, when she had told him that he still had the following years to win. Taiki was shocked and stunned. Chinatsu said she knew how hard he worked, so she realized that what she had said was somewhat insensitive. Taiki thought to himself that Chinatsu didn't know he had overheard her conversation with his mother, and they hadn't had a chance to talk since then. Chinatsu added that she couldn't bear living in the same house but not apologizing for that, and just letting it lie unresolved. So now, she made sure to apologize to him. Taiki then sat down and realized that was the reason for everything. He thought to himself, feeling embarrassed for thinking this might have been a date. When she apologized, he had thought he was being dumped. So Taiki responded that he should be the one apologizing for taking that attitude. He thought that this outing was for her to apologize and make amends. But he thought, she has nothing to apologize for. After all, what she had said had motivated him even more. He replied that Chinatsu was too considerate. While squatting down, Taiki admitted that he wasn't really bothered by such things. In fact, he recognized it as a perfectly reasonable way to look at things. And actually, he was surprised that she had been carrying that in her mind all this time. Though, because she lived in a different house, he understood that she wanted to be extra considerate. Taiki suddenly took out his phone. He searched for something and sent it to Chinatsu. He had sent Sunlight Aquarium stickers for her to download. He said that while they were living together in the house, if she ever felt uncomfortable or had something she wanted to tell him, she should just send that sticker. He said she wouldn't even need to write anything. He would come to her to find out what she wanted to say. Taiki suddenly received the sticker and was surprised that she had sent it right away. Chinatsu was embarrassed, and Taiki blushed as he looked at her. He asked if she had something she wanted to say. She looked around first and thought about what to say. She then sat down in front of him and told him he was a good housemate. Taiki carefully considered her words and was speechless. He thought to himself that this was good enough for now.